Hi there, beauties. Welcome to the Freebird podcast with One Love Community Care. This is Stephanie. I am here to hold the space for the beautiful Belinda, who is going to share us her story. And it's a really big honor to be a part of One Love Community as they are bringing in such deep levels of understanding the impact of mental health in the world and trauma-informed care and creating such an incredible space for community to come together, to hear each other's stories, to know that there's always a way to find healing and community that understand what you've been through. So we have Belinda here today. Belinda, would you like to share a little bit about your story?
Yeah, hi Stephanie. So I'm
Hi.
Belinda Bucknell. I am a healing and transformational coach. Um, I work with I coach healing and transformational coaches. Um, but yeah, my story or my journey of healing and transformation began more than 30 years ago when I was 19 years old and I was a single mum. Actually, I was 17 years old when I had um, my daughter was pregnant at 16, gave birth at 17, and was a single mother like 4 months later after the baby daddy left. But it kind of began at around 19 years old when I had very little support at that time. But even as a young person, I remember taking responsibility very seriously. Like I wanted to be a good mom, and I actually wanted to be good at everything. Um, Even with a distinct disadvantage in life. I had dreams and goals and very high aspirations about what I wanted for my life. And I even knew who I wanted to be at that very young age. But I wasn't being that person. I wasn't anywhere near to who I thought I should be. Like there was just something not quite right inside me. But I wasn't self aware enough to be able to identify what the problem was. It just Yeah, I just didn't know. Something just felt very off. But I did know. What I did know was that I was willing to do whatever it took to achieve my personal goals. And I was very interested in finding a solution and bettering myself. So I very naturally and easily turned to spirituality for answers. Spirituality was extremely natural to me. I didn't have It was like I didn't have to try hard to understand anything. Like when as soon as I read something or I learned something or experienced something spiritual, it was like a re-remembering was taking place. It was like I was learning new information, but for the first time it felt like I already knew what it was that I was learning. And I know that sounds weird, but yeah, that's something that happens to me a lot along this journey. Um, Yeah, but the point was that being spiritual was a very big part of my life back then. I mean, I was at a very young age when my friends were all studying and going to parties and I was like reading the Tibetan book of living and dying, which is very heavy spiritual literature. I was engrossed in Louise Hay's How to Heal Your Life. Like yeah, I took spirituality very seriously. I studied Buddhism. I read all of the personal growth books. I even attended sister circles and shamanic workshops. And this is way before they were popular, like way back when they were alternative and on the fringe and considered like only for weirdos. But I was very committed to my spiritual life and living according to its principles because I 100% knew that I was a spiritual being living in a human body, having a physical experience on earth. And from a very young age, I was just dedicated to living my life operating from spiritual principles and values. So I absolutely loved the path that I was on, and it felt like a returning to home journey. But then kind of, life went on after a few years of being on this path, and I found myself married, and I had a husband, and I had 4 kids and a dog and a cat and a house that we were renovating, and I was an active school mom, and I was living a very full and busy life. But things still weren't quite right, and I became really angry at this time. I was angry with my husband. I was angry with the kids. I was impatient and would, kind of erupt. And yeah, given how conscientious I was, I just couldn't figure out why. Um, so I started meditating. I meditated twice a day, which kind of sort of helped for a minute or two, but after a while, it really didn't achieve too much or what it was supposed to. So then I entered therapy, entered talking therapy. I was seeing a psychologist, and slowly, slowly, I began to understand myself better. Talking to a kind, empathic, understanding person was very helpful. But I had to keep going to therapy to feel good. Like it's almost like I formed a bit of a dependency and I couldn't leave. And I just kept
Mm.
going and going and going and couldn't figure out why it was taking so long for me to achieve what I wanted to achieve, which was be to the person that I wanted to be. And, you know, why was I still sitting there in that seat in that therapist's office, talking and crying my eyes out every week? Like 8 years I was there. And he kept asking, why is this taking so long? Why am I still here? Why am I not fixed yet? Like, what is wrong with me? And I never really got a suitable answer. I just told something vague like, oh, it takes as long as it takes. So even though I was committed, I, had a lot of, spiritual awareness and talk, I didn't seem to be making too much progress. Um, and I still wasn't feeling how I wanted to feel. And by this time in my life, I was quite overwhelmed. I was anxious. I was depressed. I was on medication. I had health issues. I had an autoimmune condition. I was extremely fatigued and I put on so much weight. And I was still angry. And I just couldn't understand it. Like it was so confusing because the principles that I had lived by were things like I am the creator of my life. I can create and attract what I want. Like Abraham Hicks was a very big um, influence on me. And my thoughts have power, and what I think, I become. And I was very conscious that my thoughts created my life. But it was confusing because I was tending to my thoughts. I had done positive thinking courses. I had learned how to transform my mindset into something positive. I learned not to complain. I learned to see the lesson and the gift in everything, in all adversity. I was meditating, journaling, being grateful, appreciative. Like my mind was in the right place and I was doing intentional manifestation work. I was doing shadow work. I was raising my vibration. I was letting stuff go, surrendering. I was doing all the things right. I was doing the work in a very intentional, deliberate way, but the work wasn't working. The work
Mm.
just was not working.
Yeah, so I'm hearing you. So it's about, you could use such theories and you were diving deep into the books and understanding it and you were on the path, but something wasn't changing inside. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, exactly. So there I was at 37 years old, and I had strong spiritual beliefs and a deep commitment to myself. And, I'd even been in therapy for a very long time. I was meditating twice a day, and yet I was still not anywhere near to living a life that was anywhere close to reaching my highest potential. I was doing the work, but I wasn't particularly satisfied, fulfilled, happy, or even healthy. And I still didn't know what the problem was. So that's when I came to a point in my life where I came across an ad for EFT, Emotional Freedom Technique, which is a type of energy medicine. And I had no idea what it was. I just knew it was something weird. Like I couldn't get my head around it, couldn't figure it out. But I was very good at following my soul at that time. My soul said, just show up for the session. So I followed the nudge and I booked an appointment and I went along full of skepticism, but I went and um, and I was absolutely blown away by the results. I felt lighter, easier, more calm, more positive, and happy for the first time in a very long time the minute I walked out the door. So I continued to go back. And well, by the third session, I'd achieved, you know what? Actually, by the third session, I'd achieved more in 3 sessions with this energy healing tool than I had in going to therapy for 8 years and meditating twice a day for 10 years. So that was my introduction to energy medicine. And after leaving that third session, I remember I sat in my car trying to figure out what happened. Like, how am I feeling so good? Went in feeling so bad and left feeling so amazing. And then in that moment, I heard a voice say to me, Belinda, you have to quit your full time day job and become a practitioner of this work, which was absolutely ridiculous to me because I had only ever in my life worked in admin or cleaning or babysitting. And there I was, like early 40s with no education, no training, no skills, no idea about being self-employed, no money in the bank. And I was being told to give up my day job and do something extremely risky. It just didn't make sense to me, but I knew that I had to help people like me who were stuck in therapy and very unhappy. And yeah, so I made a commitment to bring EFT to the world. And 3 months later, I was a qualified EFT practitioner. Then I decided to get, counseling qualification to sit alongside it. Um, yeah, actually, the truth is I haven't stopped studying. I've actually trained in a new modality every year for the last 8 years. So
Oh,
I'm
wow.
kind, I'm kind of drowning in tools. But my point is, while I was doing my counseling degree, um, I learned about this thing called childhood trauma. And I learned that I had experienced it, which came as a shock to me. I genuinely had no idea. Um, my therapist, who was a highly qualified clinical psychologist with many letters after her name, never ever mentioned the word once. Not once. I was sitting in therapy talking about my problem for 8 years, and not once did she say the trauma word. Not once did she say, well, of course, Belinda, trauma is at the root of your issues. And in fact, as I went along, it wasn't just trauma. I was diagnosed with CPTSD, which is complex um, PTSD, which is a little bit different to just regular PTSD. So yeah, I was really quite upset that that information wasn't shared with me. I was so angry, and I stopped going to therapy, and I stopped meditating, and I told him my whole world became about focusing on understanding trauma and the brain and the nervous system and getting to the real root of issues.
Mm.
Um, yeah, but I guess looking back, I can see that I had just gaslighted myself for decades and been using spiritual bypassing and toxic positivity to kind of get get by. And many professionals who I worked with as well, they let me down. Like the therapist never mentioned it. The doctor who diagnosed me with autoimmune disease, when I asked why does this happen, no particular reason. It just does. And there is a very clear link between autoimmune conditions and trauma that we know now. But also the chiropractor that I was seeing twice a week for the back pain that I had that just wouldn't go away, never once mentioned to me that it could be related to emotional pain. Um, so yeah, there were so many professionals that I felt let me down. And the truth is, all of my symptoms were all trauma based. So when the trauma word landed 10 years ago, things finally began to make sense. I mean, we know a lot more about trauma now. It's way more common. But still, today, people still don't really understand it. There's still a lot of toxic positivity and spiritual bypassing, emotional bypassing going on. Um, yeah. What's crazy is even in the trauma-informed community, it's still going on. Um, but now, because of my experience with professionals who weren't trauma-informed, my number one priority with my clients and in the world is to provide a world-class education in how brains work, nervous systems work, and how all of that is impacting their struggles. And yeah, it's often the reason that we are underachieving.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So
absolutely. So the fact that this was then about 20 years ago, and now you're saying, or maybe less, but now you're saying that there's much more awareness around the trauma and nervous systems. So
mhm.
even if you were on the path and reading these books and understanding, are you saying that this was the major piece that landed was the nervous system?
Huge piece, huge piece. There are many huge pieces. There are so many missing pieces in the puzzle. Like, because most people are on the healing and transformation journey for decades and just picking up, collecting pieces along the way. But yeah, the nervous system piece is huge. There are other pieces as well that are very important. But that was when everything started to shift. Like, I had fancy, powerful energy medicine tools that kick-started something for me. And but I just, I felt good after a session, but I didn't stay feeling good. And I got to a good place, but I couldn't stay there. And I still didn't understand why that was. It was so frustrating because everybody around me was like making life-changing breakthroughs. People were doing seminars and workshops and working with this healer and that healer, and we're becoming different human beings, and we're letting go of their issues. And here I was just struggling and struggling, even though I had knowledge and tools. And I was such a dedicated student. Um, I was doing the work and all the right things. I
Hmm.
still was struggling and underachieving. I still wasn't where I wanted to be. Yeah, so the nervous system. So what was the most true, deepest, most permanent answer for me was working somatically with the body, reconnecting to the body, and working with the brain, understanding the fight, flight, freeze mechanism and how influential that is. As soon as I started working with the brain, everything began to change. I started to feel emotionally stable, confident, secure, like there less triggers. And when I did get triggered, I'd bounce back even faster. I wasn't overwhelmed anymore. I was very calm, could think clear. I had more energy. Yeah, and at that time I learned there was a very big difference between my human and my soul, and I was able to finally connect to my soul like in a profound way, which is what I had wanted to be doing my whole life, which is what I'd been chasing, like through the spiritual pathway. That's what I had been chasing. So I finally was able to experience that true soul connection. And and then money even started to show up more. Life just got way easier. As soon as I started working with my brain and the nervous system, life got way better. So it took me a long time to discover the fight, flight, freeze mechanism and how important it is. But when I did, everything shifted.
Hmm.
Yeah. Getting out of survival mode, getting out of autopilot mode, like that's critical. The deepest level of spiritual expansion that happens when we get out of survival mode. deactivating that fight, flight, freeze mechanism. So
Mm-hmm.
that's what I learned mostly. If you could sum up anything, like true spiritual evolution requires a deactivated brain.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So this flight, fright, freeze, and there's also one more. There's the fawn. Do you want to go
Yeah.
into those at all for our listeners to understand a bit more of what that is in case they haven't heard about these aspects?
Well, the fight, flight, freeze mechanism um, is governed by the defense mechanism. It's the defense mechanism in the brain. It's governed by a part of the brain called the amygdala. And the amygdala is like I look at it as the control center, control. I look at it as an army barracks defense force. So our brain has within it an army barracks defense force, and there's a control tower sitting in the brain. And that's the amygdala. And the amygdala is constantly looking outside of us for danger. What is dangerous to Belinda right now is what my brain is constantly looking at. And it may see somebody, it may see a lion chasing me, it may see a vicious dog, it may see somebody wanting to hurt me. And as soon as it sees that, it's going to alert me that there's a problem, that I'm not safe. And that lack of safety comes through as anxiety, or it can come through as the need to, well, fight is anger, rage. So I was in fight for a very long time, because my brain was not happy with what it was seeing in the outside world, and I was in fight. And sometimes we go into flight, which is anxiety, and I want to run and I want to get out of here and I just want to avoid this situation. And then if the brain can't fight, if the brain can't flee, it goes into freeze, which comes off as stagnancy, procrastination. Freeze is a very slow moving body, can't think, brain fog, can't make decisions. I think that a lot of my life was spent being in a state of functional freeze. I was a very functional person, but a part of my brain was still in freeze. And then we have the fawn. The fawn mechanism is when we get on side with the other person. Whenever we sense danger, we just get on side. We people please. We become good. We do the right thing. We like to make other people happy. Everybody kind of has these aspects of ourselves, but sometimes they're chronic and sometimes they're stuck. And what a lot of people don't understand is that it's not just what's outside of us that determines um, that our brain is determining as something dangerous. What happens is the amygdala turns the its perspective inside. It looks inside of us, and sometimes emotions and the feelings in our body become the threat, the danger. So yeah, and this kind of goes alongside with toxic positivity and spiritual bypassing. A lot of the time when we grow up, we're not allowed to experience bad things. We're not allowed to have bad feelings. We're not allowed to be negative. We're not allowed to make other people upset. So our brains record that information and they remember um, negativity is dangerous. Feelings are dangerous. Emotions are dangerous. So that becomes an added layer to the puzzle of healing and transformation when our brains don't even allow us to be sad or to be overwhelmed or depressed or yeah, really important for our brains to know that no matter what we feel, we are safe, and they don't always know that.
Mm, yeah. So once you started to experience these aspects of your nervous system and your, patterns, um, what do you think started to shift? When did that start to shift, and how long did it take once you were understanding of it? Because it sounds like you're very mindy, very brainy, yeah? So once you understand something, it starts to shift, but then again, there's a way of understanding from the brain and an understanding from the body, right?
There's a difference between intellectual awareness and somatic embodied awareness. Like um, when I discovered the nervous system, understanding the nervous system is like learning a whole new language.
Mm,
There's
it
a
is.
lot to learn, especially if you've been disconnected for a very long time. The reconnection process can be tricky, especially with people that are experiencing mental health issues.
Yeah, yeah.
The
So what
re
advice would you have for them, for people who are having challenges with their mental health and wanting to heal and experience what you've experienced that was so helpful for you?
Yeah, so my suggestion is to work with somebody who is a somatic therapist who can help people reconnect them with their body. Because mental illness essentially at its core is a disconnection from the body. We're up in the mental world. The trauma becomes so big and the trauma is in the body that the brain senses that's where the danger is. So it disconnects us, cuts us off from the neck down. The brain
Mm,
just disconnects us so that we don't have to feel all of that trauma sitting there in the body. And that's when mental health issues start. That's the first step to mental health issues is being disconnected from the body. So yeah, when I work with clients, that is the very first thing we do. Begin the reconnection process.
okay. So finding a somatic therapist, and many of the people who work with One Love Community Care are working with somatics. I know I work with somatics, and it's definitely a big shift of understanding the stories in our body versus, the body and the body's needs. So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, just wanting to emphasize that I definitely agree that somatics can help a lot, help us to get out of our head, help us to get into our body.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and if you were to speak to yourself, this 19-year-old part of you, the the part of you that was, struggling and found yourself as a single mom so young, and even though you felt you were on your path and you were happy with it, you were having some challenges. What would you say to yourself, your older self, to your younger challenged self?
Oh my gosh, I wish I could go back and tell myself that there is nothing wrong with you because so for so long I felt like there was something wrong with me. Like I'm just not normal. I am just completely um yeah, just there's something majorly wrong with me. And if I could go back, I would tell her that actually your brain did what it needed to do in order to survive. And the reason you can't get ahead and the reason you don't feel good is not your fault. That's what I would love to tell her. Because
Mm,
ultimately, that's what came out of decades of doing the work and not being able to get to where I wanted to be. Is that left me with the feeling that there is something fundamentally wrong with me. And this is all the clients that come to me, they hold this belief as well. And so when we start working together and I provide the nervous system education and the neurobiological education, they get it. They get, oh my God, it's not me. It's actually my brain did this and I didn't have a choice. So it's very empowering when we start to work with the brain, with the body, with the nervous system, and we understand what it's doing, why it's doing it, and how to support it to not do that anymore.
mm. So, yeah, that's beautiful. And How did you find that support to continue working in that way? What was
How did I?
yeah, what was the way that you were able to find this type of support? Like how did it come to you? Where was that moment, that aha moment where it was like, "Oh, this is what's been missing."
Yeah, it probably wasn't a dramatic moment. Um, I feel like my soul is always guiding me, and everything that I'm urged to do or nudged in a certain direction, I know that's my soul leading me on the path that I need to be on. And it was just, I think it was just watching a video. I just came across a YouTube video of Irene Lyon. Irene Lyon is the queen of nervous system health. And again, it was one of those situations where I had never heard anybody talk about the nervous system before, but the minute she started talking about it, it was like this information was absorbing into me, and I was like, yes, 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 that's right, that's right. And I was agreeing with it, but I had never come across this information before. So there was like a remembering taking place. But it wasn't a dramatic moment. It was just I stumbled across Irene Lyon, and she was my entry into the world of nervous system healing.
Mm, yes, beautiful. That's beautiful. Yes. So once you started to experience all of that with nervous system healing, how did it change in your life? Like, as you said, it wasn't a dramatic moment, it was more subtle. So, can you just share about this journey, this?
Yeah, well, actually, what ended up happening when I started doing nervous system work, when I got back into my body, was that I developed adrenal fatigue. So I had total burnout. So I was working with my body, but I didn't catch it in time. I had decades of stored trauma in my system. I had decades of my brain being activated. I had decades of being, in fight, flight, freeze mode. And that caught up with me. And adrenal fatigue set in. And that
Mm,
stopped me in my tracks. Like I was used to having emotional issues. I was used to struggling emotionally. But when I could not get out of bed, not even for my daughter's 18th birthday to get out of bed and make her a birthday cake because I was so weak. Um, yeah, that was a very serious time for me. But it was basically a payback. So I always say that, if we're in fight, flight, freeze mode, if we're activated, it's like credit. We can get the energy now in the moment, but you have to pay it back later. And as soon as my brain was deactivated, adrenal fatigue set in and I had to pay it back. And yeah, that was a good few years of rebuilding my body and starting from the ground up. I had to cancel my life, like not work with clients anymore, give up my wellness center space. I couldn't be a mom, I couldn't be a partner. Like everything just came back to very, very basic living. Did I get the right nutrients today? Did I put enough water in my body? Did I put my feet in the soil? Did I put my face in the sun? Did I say good things to myself? You know, came down to very basic things. And then slowly, slowly, I had to rebuild from that place.
mhm. That's beautiful. And as far as, yeah, the rebuilding, how did that go? Where did you start with the rebuilding? Because I think a lot of people might feel out there, our listeners might be feeling like, yeah, they understand that, and that feeling of, there's so much to rebuild once you start. Um, yeah, where did you find your ability to go step by step in that way? And what are some step by step ways you could share with our listeners out there?
Well, do you know what? Do you know what? The rebuilding process um, wasn't the worst part because I actually didn't have a choice. what I did. I had no energy. My body was not working. My body said no. I couldn't do what I wanted to do. The worst part of having adrenal fatigue and burnout is that the amount of pressure that I was putting on myself to get well. Like my brain could not accept that I was sick, that I was unwell, that I couldn't see clients. How am I going to make money? How am I going to be a partner? How am I going to contribute to their household? I have 4 kids. How am I going to raise my kids? Like being unwell was traumatic for my brain. It just did not let me be in that space. So this was one of the biggest learning things that I learned is how much pressure my mind and my brain was putting on me on a day-to-day basis that I hadn't even noticed until I couldn't function. And all of a sudden, all of this pressure became really evident. And I think most people don't understand on a day-to-day basis how much pressure our subconscious mind put on us to achieve, to keep up, to make money, to, have the life that we want, to make sure that we're not missing out, to make sure that we get married and have a great car and a beautiful house and have fancy holidays. Like the amount of pressure that we put on ourselves is huge. And that was the most beautiful thing about me having adrenal fatigue is that I learned to have a relationship with that part of myself. Like I discovered that part of myself and I learned how to take the pressure off. I learned to not operate from that place. I learned to operate from a different place that wasn't the pressure.
Mm.
Um, yeah, that pressure went all the way back to childhood. Um, but yeah, it was great to discover it. And
Yeah.
healing became so much easier
Mm.
when I could just accept that this is what was happening. It became very difficult. It was very difficult when my brain could not accept that I was unwell. But as soon as it could, yeah, the healing was quite straightforward.
Oh, beautiful. So as far as the things that you were saying that you started to say to yourself, and it was those little things of how you speak to yourself today, can you mention some things that were good that helped you of how you spoke to yourself? And I would also really invite the listeners out there to even get out a pad of paper and a pen and start writing some beautiful offerings, such as what Belinda is going to share with us, or other things that inspire you that you would be like, oh, this is a way I can start speaking to myself because you are your own best friend and lover. And if you aren't kind to yourself, then that's where to start with that self-love.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. And it's quite often very sneaky the ways that we aren't loving towards ourselves, the way that we aren't respectful. Like, and it's not us at a conscious level. It's actually a part of us called I call it the protector part. The protector part has rules. It has, it's governed by the past, by the experiences that we had in the past, and it's remembering all of the things that weren't great for us, all of the ways in which we suffered as children, and it reminds us of them when we're adults. It never forgets, and it constantly reminds us, and it puts pressure on us to be better than we are. Like there is a part of us that judges us. It's this harsh inner critic, and it's saying, no, you can't rest. You have to keep going. And it's saying, no, you're not good enough. You have to be better. So I guess the first thing is to identify that protector part that um, wants us to be better and to form a relationship with it so we can hear it and to basically confront it and say, actually, no, I am doing a great job. I am enough. I safe right now. I am safe to be me. Because a lot of the times our brains don't let us believe that,
Hmm.
especially when
So,
we've experienced childhood trauma. There's no
mhm,
safety. There's no safety on board. There's no safety on board. And quite often that protector part feeds us that information. You are not safe to be you. You have to be different.
mm, yes. Yeah. Okay. So noticing that that safety piece is huge, and finding even a place in your body that you might feel safer than another place. Because if someone doesn't feel safe and they hear those words, I am safe, what would you say for them to actually drop in deeper to that feeling?
I don't think anybody can. Well, actually, there is something I can give you a little hint, but I'm not a big advocate of doing conscious work until the beneath the surface subconscious work with the brain has been done. Like, because that's what I did my whole life. I did conscious work above the surface, um, which was, it's kind of like that positive thinking thing. It's like if you have a, you're driving a car, you're driving down the road in a car and you hear something kind of going bang in the engine. There's this noise coming from the engine. And if we're trying to consciously change our minds, our brains, what we're doing is we're saying, oh, don't worry about that noise. Just remember my car is beautiful. My car is red. I have a beautiful red car. The air conditioning is great. How shiny it is. These seats are so comfortable. Yeah, it's like sometimes we turn up the radio so we don't have to hear what's going on in the engine, but
Mm,
that doesn't always work. So what I noticed is there's a big difference between healing and transformation. Healing is where we do the subconscious stuff, the brain stuff, the nervous system stuff. We absolutely need to heal the body and the brain before we can do the transformation. And the transformation is when we can use affirmations, where we can use beautiful words and sentiments, and we can remind ourselves that we can shift our awareness and we can think better thoughts. But in order to get to that place where you can do the conscious above the surface work, we need to go a little bit deeper and do that subconscious stuff that we can't control. It's not been my experience that I can control my subconscious mind and my brain with my conscious thoughts.
mm, beautiful. Yeah. This is a very big truth. And thanks for putting words to it and the importance to it. I think that hopefully the listeners have gotten something from that. I'd love to hear more about your own journey in that, and how it affected the people around you, and anything that you can share from your vulnerabilities of the challenges that you went through to get to where you are now, which sounds like you're in a very healthy, vivacious place right now.
Yeah, I'm in a great place right now. I do feel very resilient, quite strong, and I have uh, beautiful awareness. Yeah, I'm in a great place. But everything that I experienced in the past um, affected the people around me. Like it was relationships in particular were quite difficult for me. I was a mom at a very young age, and um, but yeah, I have a lot of regret about being a traumatized mom, being an overwhelmed and traumatized mom. I was disconnected. I was quite dismissive. I only wanted my kids to focus on positive things. I couldn't be with their emotions. I couldn't handle too many needs. I was drowning in my own overwhelm, and I didn't have the strength to hold. This is why I was so angry in the beginning, because I had never been tended to at an emotional level. And I was walking around the house, and, what about me? What about me? I care about all these people, husband, cat, dog, 4 kids. I've got a farm. I've got so much to do. What about me? there was a much younger part of me that hadn't been connected with and tended to, understood, and her trauma hadn't been known or seen. So that affected who I was in the world. It affected how I worked. At work, it affected how I parented. It affected my um, relationship, both personal, like with my friendships and with my partner. Life was hard. Life was really hard. Life was really hard. And now it's so easy, so much easier for me to be in the world, to connect with people, to have good relationships. There's less conflict. I'm more resilient. I'm unaffected by, yeah, you can have, we can disagree and that's a problem for you. And I'm unaffected. I'm on my path. I'm kind of a bit unshakable at the moment. Mm. Yeah,
Mm,
it's really good to be able to get to a place where I can stay in my own lane. And if I don't, I have the tools to bring myself back. I have so much more to offer the world now that I've done this work.
beautiful. Yes. And that's a big thing because I think most people out there want to give back. When we go through journeys, we want to give back. So knowing that you have that ability to offer more to the world from this work and through all of the things you've tried on your path, this is what's worked for you. Is there any other things you have to share about that, about other pieces you tried and anything that really did help or didn't help in your journey?
So everything did help, but it's a matter of what was permanent, what actually shifted the needle and allowed things to become permanent. Um, so I'm predominantly a spiritual practitioner, but I do specialize in trauma. But what I also understood along the way was that even after I worked on my childhood trauma in a very profound way and discharged it, moved it through my system, and became emotionally regulated, um, stuff still kept coming for me, and I still kept getting triggered, and I couldn't understand what that was about. I'm like, hang on, the nervous system works, discharge the trauma. Why am I getting affected in this huge way? What I didn't understand was intergenerational trauma. I didn't understand just how much of the trauma that I had experienced wasn't even mine, and how it didn't even start with me, and it didn't even belong to me, and that I was experiencing things that um, I had just inherited from my parents just by way of DNA. Sometimes I have just inherited. Sometimes we just inherit it because trauma stays in the body. It's not something that ever just magically goes away. So when two people conceive a child, their trauma goes along into that, um, in creating that child just by way of DNA. So just by virtue of being born, because I always used to have the idea that somehow when I'm born into a clean slate, and I am this, little human being with all possibilities available to me. Like, the world is my oyster. I'm a clean slate. I can just start from here. But actually, we're all born with a history. We're all born with our parents' unresolved stuff. And sometimes it goes even back further than our parents, usually our grandparents. Because, I mean, I'm not sure if you're aware of epigenetics and the way, but scientifically, it's been shown that we are in, as I was in my grandmother. It was when my grandmother um, had my mother. By the time she was 5 months old, my mother, who was in my grandmother, had all of the eggs that she needed in order to make me.
Mm-hmm.
So I was actually in my grandmother. So whatever my grandmother was experiencing way back then was filtering down into me somehow. So we're all born with history, with our parents and our grandparents' history. So then I started to understand ancestral trauma and how big that is and how much of an impact that has on who we are and why we can't move forward, why we get stuck and trapped. And I started to understand how things happen at certain ages. So, for instance, 16 years old is a very big thing in my family. A lot of stuff happens to a lot of people at 16 years old, quite dramatic um, adversity. And yeah, just going back to my grandmother's generation, um, something very traumatic happened in her line, in her family line. So, and ages quite often trigger um, trauma. We can be the same age that our parents were when they experienced something, and then we experience it as well. I have a client at the moment who's has a business, and his business is continuing to be robbed. And we started talking about that and discovered that the first time he was robbed as a child, which was extremely traumatic for him, was at 7 years old. And his daughter is now 7 years old, and she's having nightmares about people coming into the house and robbing her, robbing the house, robbing the family, which is, yeah, incredible. So there's always a thread that links us.
Mm.
We're not separate to our ancestors. We're not separate to our family system.
Yes, this
It
is true.
plays a large role. It plays a large role in
Mhm.
getting
And
in
so
being
when
stuck.
you found yourself healing the ancestral trauma in your own way, did things change with you and your relationship to your mother or father or anyone else in your in your family?
Oh, ancestral work is very powerful, and yes, it changes everything for sure. It's an even deeper level of healing. Yes, absolutely. Hmm.
Mm. So yeah, what did you find changed? How did it shift?
Well, again, everything that helps means that I start to feel less triggered. I'm just not affected by that. And I can make a different choice by something that happened. So, you know, um, if I was triggered by my mother, if there was like an ongoing relationship, and I just, because quite a lot of the time I felt unseen by her. And yeah, I started to do ancestral work, and I just started to become unaffected. She can be who she is. I don't need her to change. I don't need her to see me. She can have her issues and I can still show up, and I'm not affected. I can make different choices. I can feel like an adult. It's
Mm.
it's really wonderful to move through the world without being triggered and constantly being in a state of emotional upheaval, being affected by other people's limitations. Instead of
Mm.
me, constantly wanting other people to change, well, you shouldn't be that way. I'm just unaffected. You can be who you are. You can be as traumatized as you are. I'm okay.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. So it's about staying in your own lane, as you said, like that, and not react,
Hmm.
which can be
Yeah.
challenging as well.
Yeah, it's just the whole healing transformational journey, whether it's childhood trauma or working at an ancestral level. It's always about claiming more and more power to have more and more choice, and not operating in a kind of automated, habitual, old patterned way.
Mm. Yes, beautiful. Well, well, that's such beautiful wisdom. Thank you for sharing that with us. And I hope that our listeners out there have gotten something from this as well. Um, yeah. as we're coming towards more the end of our podcast for today, I'm just curious if there's any specific advice you can share about when you're at that point where you're at the very bottom and you can't even think about learning something, so it's a matter of knowing that, as you said, like sometimes it doesn't help to see people or to read these books. Like, what would you advise someone who is really at that, like, lowest of low, dark tunnel, black night, like dark night of the soul? How would you help them to come out from that space and to come back to where you're what you're speaking about is really powerful and beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah, well, um, I guess the first thing to do is to understand that when you're in that space, it's a journey. So for a lot of my life, I was looking for a quick fix. I just wanted one session or a couple of sessions or one practitioner that was going to help me, and then I was going to get to where I needed to be, who I needed to be. It was like it was difficult for me to understand that healing is a journey that requires a commitment. It's a process, and we need to be committed to that process in order to get to where we want to be. Um,
Mm.
Quick fixes have never worked for me. Like I've been um, attracted by glossy marketing, and it just never led to anything permanent. So I guess my point is to understand and to not under budget, because this is what we do. We under budget. We think it's never going to take as long as it does. We don't want it to be too expensive. We don't want to use too much time or effort or energy. We're in a really big hurry to get to a place to where we want to be, which I understand because where we are is not that great. So I get the pressure and I get the urgency, but to really understand that it is a journey, and it takes time and effort and commitment. Just like because my clients often come to me with a very large history of childhood trauma, and they say, Belinda, I just want to sign up to work with you for 3 sessions or 6 sessions. And that's not um, realistic, because it's like if you have a childhood history of trauma, it's like you're emotionally obese and you want to go to the gym just 2 or 3 times and then you want to be the right weight. But that's not how it works. So it is a process where we just commit to the process. So, having
Mm.
said that, what I would suggest to people who are in a really dark space is to um, I don't know, go onto YouTube. YouTube has so many free resources, and start educating yourself about childhood trauma. Start educating yourself about the nervous system. Start
Mm.
educating yourself about the brain. Just do as little as you can. But yeah, there are some great resources out there on YouTube.
Yes, absolutely. There are. Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Belinda. It's been so beautiful to hear your shares and your truth and vulnerability, and to see it from this point of really having tried so many different pathways, and acknowledging which one has truly worked for you. And yet we know every person is very different, and it may be something different for every person out there because we all have our own specific ways. And um yeah, I feel like somatics is such a powerful place to start to understand yourself and the aspects of yourself. So it's a really refreshing topic. Yeah, thank you.
Thank
We
you
really
for having
appreciate
me,
you.
Stephanie. Thank
Yeah,
you.
absolutely. Absolutely. Is there any other thing at all that you feel is great for our listeners, the ones who are out there, to know before we close up this space? And
Uh, well, I can dispel a myth that I quite often have to dispel in my session with clients, and that is around emotional regulation. So, one of the big pieces of healing and transformation is to understand that emotional regulation is based on nervous system regulation. And the nervous system has a capacity, so we have to build the nervous system's capacity to be with big emotions and stress. But a lot of people say to me, Belinda, yeah, I'm doing the work. I'm regulating, which means that they notice themselves being triggered. They notice themselves in a tricky spot. They're upset. They're unhappy. They're overwhelmed, whatever it is. And then they're going to do something. They go and do something, a technique, a modality, a tool. They use a strategy to do something to become regulated. And I mean, that's useful, but that's not regulation. What a lot of people don't understand about regulation is that regulation doesn't require tools. Regulation is about the nervous system bringing you out of out of the fight, flight, freeze mechanism on your own. Like the body automatically bringing you down out of a high activated state. So in the beginning, my nervous system did not have the ability to come out of a trigger on its own. I had to teach it how to do that for me. I had to train it to do that. So regulation, emotional regulation is often the
Absolutely.
the 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 goal. It's the goal. But many people say, well, I'm regulating. I'm going to go and get regulated. But they're just using the word in a very in a way that's not accurate. So I do like to clear up myths. It is a myth that if you have to do something, you're still dysregulated. Regulation is the nervous system creating safety for you and bringing you out of activation.
Mm. Absolutely. Thank you for that and that redefining and remembrance. And as you said, it is a bit of a remembrance, remembering who you are when you drop into these spaces. So
Mm.
wonderful. Thank
Mm.
you so much, Belinda.
Oh,
Um, and thank you to all our listeners to dropping in and knowing that every bit counts. Everything that you do decide to do for yourself really, really counts. Even just hearing about someone else's story where you've gotten here such a powerful tool to bring into your own life and your own story. Um, thank you so much, Belinda. Where can we find you if there's anything you want to share about what you're doing now or where we can find you?
you can access me on Facebook or Instagram. I'm Belinda Bucknell or belindabucknell.com.
Beautiful. Okay. Well, thank you so much. And we really appreciate you and all of our listeners. So, those who are also feeling to share their stories, feel free to connect with us at One Love Community Care. Send us a message, send us an email, and feel free to let us know that you want to share your story or you want to talk to someone who's shared their story. And One Love Community Care is there for you in any way that we can find so many different ways as we do work with everything from finding NDIS respite to counselors to, for sure, somatic counselors are available. Yeah. Thank you so much and have a wonderful day.